interesting background here. Okay, here we go, my friends. So today's title is how do we internalize the Passover holiday? Chaim. So the first thing we have to do if we're talking about internalizing the Pesach holiday, the Passover holiday, we have to understand what a holiday is. And so anytime I talk about the holidays, I always start with this introduction, which is we have to understand that when Judaism talks about holiday, it's different than when other groups, countries talk about holidays. A lot of times holiday means, take a day off, or a holiday means we're going to remember something that happened in the past. We're going to remember something from way back when. And we have to understand that when it's much better in English, to be honest with you. We call a holiday in Judaism because it's a holy day. A holy day means that there's something real going on. This isn't just a Memorial Day. This isn't a day to just go and be at a sale or whatever. This means that there's something real going on over here, right? So we just came off the holiday of Purim, right? One of the main themes of the holiday of Purim is seeing Hashem in the nitty-gritty, seeing Hashem in the coincidences of life, seeing God, unmasking God as the one who's running the show behind the natural events and the political events of our world. And so the idea of Purim, therefore, is that there is an energy that's in the air of this time to be able to see that more than usual, right? Of course, we're always supposed to be thinking this way. We're also supposed to be understanding and knowing that God's running the show behind what's going on in our lives in the natural world. But especially at Purim time, that is the avoda, that is the personal work that we can be involved with during that time. That's what's coming to the surface. That's the energy that's in the air. And so when we discuss a holiday and different aspects of a holiday, we have to know that what we're looking at, we're not just looking at something for its historical value to understand, what is the Jewish history behind this holiday? That's fine, it's nice to know, but that's not really the point. The point is, what is going on for me with this right now, right? And this is the idea that, like, you find in Judaism, there's a lot of remembering going on. If you look in the Kiddush for Shabbat, you see it says, Zeichel Etziat Mitzrayim, Zeichel L'Maaseh Bereshit. That it's a memorial for God creating the world, a memorial of God creating. Remember that God took us out of Egypt. So again, it's not just about we want to remember something as something in the days of yore. God came and He took us out of Egypt with the great plagues. No, it's not that. When you remember something, you're taking it from the back of your mind and bringing it to the front of your mind. You're becoming conscious of it in a way that, like, just think about a memory in your own life that was very emotional or that was very scary. If you really go into really thinking about that, it could conjure up feelings, those same feelings you had before. It could conjure up, if it was a scary event, your pulse might start to go faster, It means to say, but the event's not happening, so why are you feeling that? The answer is that, like, that's what your memory does. That's what remembering something that matters to you, truly remembering it does. It still has an effect on you. So that you are living with a flavor of that experience right now here in the present, right? So it's kind of like a sun and the sun ray. The source of light is Passover from way back when, but still that light shines throughout every generation of this time during this time period. Right? And that energy is what we are trying to tap into during this time and internalize and live with, right? So what is the energy of Pesach? So of course, there are different ways we can take this. There are different aspects that we can look at. But the best place to start always with anything, if you want to get to the essence of what anything is in Judaism at its core, is that we have a little Kabbalistic secret here, and that is you want to go to the name of the thing. That in the name of the thing lies the essence of the thing, right? Matter of fact, how do you say name in Hebrew? Shem, related to the Hebrew word sham, which means there, because in the name of the thing lies the there of the thing. In the name of the thing lies the purpose of the thing, the goal of the thing, what it's really here for, its destiny, what it's really all about. And so if I want to get to the essence of something, I want to get to the name of that thing and really get into it and see what that's all about. And so, and by the way, you see this also, you see that this is how the world is created in general, the idea that God created the world with speech. For example, at the beginning of the creation story, it says, God said, let there be light, and there was light. You see God speaking these things into creation because at the root of the thing is the speech that God spoke. The name of the thing is at the root of the thing, and the thing is an expression of the speech, right? Matter of fact, you see this in Hebrew words sometimes. Matter of fact, how do you say to speak in Hebrew is lidaber? A thing in Hebrew is davar. It's the same root because a thing is a manifestation of the speech, and the speech is at the inner core of the thing, right? Also, if you look in the first verse of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Look a little bit closer. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created. First word is et. What does et mean? So there is no literal translation of the Hebrew word et into English. However, we know that nothing in Torah is extra. It's not missing. It's not just some additional thing. So Maggid of Mezrich comes along and explains what's et. It's very simple. Et is aleph to taf. The Hebrew language. Bereshit bara Elokim. In the beginning, God created et, aleph to taf, from A to Z. God creates the Hebrew language, and then God uses the Hebrew language to create the Shemaim and the Aretz, the heavens and the earth. And so, at the core of everything is the speech that God spoke, and we have a whole other class we can do on this. I do a class on names. It's not for now. Anyway, what we're talking, actually, we have a whole series on letters. That maybe we can do. I'll take it about 4 or 5 times. Maybe after Sfirat Omer, maybe after Shavuot, maybe we'll do like that. Someone's got to remind me. So after all that introduction, so what we want to do is look at the name for the holiday, right? Of course, which is Pesach, Passover. And so first thing that jumps out on us is this idea of passing over. Now, typically we know that the story of Passover, we know that the name is like, okay, God passed over the houses of the Jews as he went and put the smack down on the firstborn of the Egyptians, right? We're familiar with that story. Makes a good movie. Awesome. But Kabbalistically, we know that this is really getting into also our personal experience, right? That first and foremost, let's just understand Kabbalistic. And we're going to talk more about this, God willing, as we get closer to Pesach, as we talk about between Passover and Shavuot. We're going to go over this point a bunch of times, that according to Kabbalah, according to Arizal, according to Rashash, we find that what's going on, that Pesach night is a high night, that it's beyond that, like normally you're wherever you are in your relationship with God, that's what you experience. Not on Passover, Seder night. The idea is if we're tapped in, so we can get beyond whatever our particular spiritual level is on Passover night. We become free beyond those bounds of wherever we're at for that moment. Now, of course, what ultimately happens is, what goes up must come down, and that's the rest of Sfirat Omer and Shavuot, and then we have to build it back up. And okay, we're going to talk about, God willing, all of this in its proper time. But what I want to focus on for a second is that freeing of constraints, that getting outside, that getting beyond, which is going on in the Passover Seder night, right, in particular, and really that's the energy of Passover altogether, is this energy of freedom, this energy of going beyond. And that's really what this energy of Pesach is. So again, just like the other holidays, like we mentioned before, every holiday has its particular focus, its particular avoda, its particular thing that we can be working on and focusing in on, even though, of course, all of these things are good things and you can do it any time of the year, right? Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, a time of teshuvah, a time of returning to God. You guys, you can return to God today. You don't have to wait to Yom Kippur. But the idea is that the gates are particularly open for teshuvah during the time of Yom Kippur, during the time around that time. And so similarly, a person can quit smoking any time of the year. A good thing to do on any day. But particular during the Passover time, particular during the month of Nisan, the gates, the energy is in the air for that. It's more conducive for that than usual. And that's what we're focusing in on during this time of Passover, during this month of Nisan. The month of Nisan, we see in the word Nisan is from the word is nes. which is a miracle, right? But also in there, right? Miracle means getting beyond the typical constraints, getting beyond what comes natural, right? And that's the idea also where the word for miracle is wrapped up with the word for a challenge in your life, which is a nisayon. Because through the challenge, we get outside of our typical natural constraints, and we get beyond that, we act miraculously, right? And this is why the tzaddik, the righteous person, is the one who's, for them, it's miracles all the time, because they're always looking to be proactive and live beyond what comes natural. You know, the greatest, a rabbi of mine likes to say all the time that the most fundamental desire of a person is the desire for what's familiar, right? That's always going to be the typical standard fallback default position, is that falling into familiarity, right? That's, in many ways, that's our malik. And people a lot of times like to think that what's the issue? That the issue at hand is that it's a fear of change. It's a fear of the unknown. I think it's misunderstood. It's not a fear of the unknown. It's a fear of the death of the known. You hear that idea? Because people are like, okay, I can't be something else, right? But it's not about the something else that you're going to be. It's about leaving behind wherever you're at right now. So anytime you want to make a change, there's a part of you that's trying to hold you back. There's a part of you that's trying to stop you. Why? Because that side of you knows that if you go ahead and make this change, it doesn't exist anymore. It is no longer. It ceases to exist. It's a fear of the death of the known. This is why the Maharal explains, and many other Kabbalists explain, that anytime you want to make a change, it involves a destruction of the level that you were previously at. Right? The Maharal compares this to an egg. How does an egg become a chick? In order for the egg, which is essentially an inanimate object, to ultimately to form a chick, to form a live being, there first needs to be a vacated space within that egg in order to hold that chick, that baby chicken, right? Which means to say that there's a loss of the level that it was previously at, right? Famous example that people bring also is like you plant a seed in the ground. Before it grows into something, first there's like that seed has to decay, has to rot to a certain extent. And so similarly, a lot of times what's holding us back is getting stuck in the person that we're at, right? A lot of times what's standing in the way, that on the other side, famous line, on the other side of our fear is our freedom, right? Because we're afraid of losing the status quo. We have a fear that's rooted in familiarity, that if I'm not this, then I don't exist. And so our higher side of us, of course, has to move forward, and instead of keep running from the fear, but turn towards the fear and step into that fear and feel that uncomfortability and keep going anyway, right? And if we start doing this in areas of our life, and we start becoming conscious and going ahead, we start to actually start doing this and enjoying it. You start to actually get very uncomfortable you start becoming very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's when you're moving as a human being. That's when you're growing as a human being, right? And so all of this is about freedom and about growth. And what we're looking for in Pesach is this is the all-encompassing freedom. And then, God willing, when it's time for Sfirat HaOmer, we're going to get more into, okay, how do I plug this general concept of freedom into this particular detail into life, into that particular detail of my characteristics, into this particular, how am I going to be emotionally intelligent even here, which has been a struggle for me. God willing, we'll go through those Sfirot, God willing, when the time comes. It's going to be, God willing, looking forward to it. I remember last year we did something on a little bit of this, and thank God it was very good. So this is the idea. This is the idea of what Pesach is all about, right? It's from here that growth begins, right? You can hear from what we're saying over here, you can understand that like from here, everything begins. Without this, you're just coasting, you're on status quo, you leave this world the same way you came in, right? If you don't go ahead and do what we're talking about here. But this is how we start growing, expanding on ourselves, moving forward. And And you see, this is why perhaps you see that this concept of freedom, of personal freedom, national freedom, is at the beginning of the story of the Jewish people. And not, by the way, just the Jewish people, the Jewish nation, and the story of the Jewish people leaving Egypt, but also the Jewish family. Abraham begins this way as well, right? Let's look at the Avram story for a second, right? The first thing that we see in the Torah that God says to Abe is Lech lecha me'artzecha v'na'atecha mibeit avicha. Lech means to go, lecha means to you. God says to Abe, listen, man, you want to be that spiritual searcher, you want to be that searcher for truth, you want to be that person who is on a journey. Lech lecha, if you want to go to you, if you want to go to the reality of who you are, if you want to go to your potential, God says, I got a 3-point plan, prerequisite in order to go ahead and go on that journey, in order to figure out where that's going to take you. And so God says, that you have to leave from your land, your birthplace, and from your parents' house. But can you hear the idea? It's not just talking about geographical location, right? It's saying you have to leave from your land, meaning the energy of your land, the culture, the mentality of your land. You have to leave from your birthplace. Can you hear the idea that we each have a place in which we are born, quote unquote? We have certain biology, we have certain nature, certain genetic predispositions that if you want to go ahead and become a free person on a journey, it means to be able to take a step back from those genetic predispositions and choose in another path. Notice how we're not talking about genetic predeterminations, we're talking about genetic predispositions. There's a difference, right? And so, from your land, from your birthplace, and from your parents' house. That we all have certain ways of being, habits we've picked up, especially when it comes to relationships or familial relationships, that we've picked up. That's our autopilot. That based on where we grew up, right? I'll give a story I like to tell about this is I once saw a video that was going around on social media, and it was one of these late night talk shows on in the US, where the host comes on and he tells his audience, listen, tomorrow night's Halloween, here's what I want you to do. When your kids get home after trick-or-treating, after they go to sleep, steal all their candy, and then when they come looking for it the next morning and they don't find it and they come asking you for it, and they say, hey, do you see my candy? And tell them you ate it, and then record their responses and send it to us, right? So I don't know, maybe some of you guys saw this, but a few days later, they came out with like a montage of all these different clips of people who actually did this, delinquent parenting, stealing and traumatizing your kid, stealing from your kids and traumatizing them. And sure enough, pretty much all the kids cry, right? One kid, he's throwing things across the room, another kid's banging his head against the table, another one's pounding his fist against the wall. And then there was this one girl who actually sat down across from her mom and starts talking about her feelings. But mom, why would you do that? Didn't you know how it would make me feel? So, the whole audience is cracking up, right? But all you have to do is take a pause for a second, take a step back and just scratch the surface a little bit and say, hold on a second. Why is it that this kid throws something across the room, this kid knocks his head against the table, the other kid pounding his fist against the wall, and this kid's talking about her feelings? Can you hear the idea that, 70, 75%, let's call it 70. That's 70% of the time. Can you hear 80% of statistics are made up. So here goes. Can you hear the idea that 70% of the time, what's going on there is that the kid is responding the way they saw the parent respond when the parent had something happen to them that they thought was unfair. So it's not because the parent said anything to the kid. No, it's because of what the parent did, right? And that right? I once saw a line, I think also was on social media. So I saw a quote once, something along the lines of, be careful be careful. Something about be careful who you are. What you say to your kid becomes their inner voice. Something along those lines, right? What's going externally from you, for you, it's a branch. It doesn't affect your root, but that is what becomes their root, right? And so this is the idea. God's saying to Abe, basically what God's saying to Abe is nature and nurture, right? If you're took an AP Psych class, you know about that, right? Nature and nurture, except Judaism is saying, and God is saying to Abe, listen, we got nature, we got nurture, but don't think like the psychologists with the degrees who want to, or certainly the extremists of the nature field, the extremists of the nurture, position, who say that like you're locked into your nature, you're locked into your nurture. No, you have those nature, we have nature and you have nurture. But the idea is, lech lecha, take a step. If you want to go on a real journey, if you want to go truly to self-discover and who and what you really are, what you really could be, you got to leave from your land, your birthplace, and from your parents' house. And that's how the journey begins. First thing God said to Abe in the Torah. Unbelievable, right? And of course, the same thing is true by the Jewish nation. You got the Jewish nation. There they are, in the beginning of the book of Exodus, there they are, enslaved in Egypt. Can you hear the idea that Egypt, when we hear about Egypt, it's not just about the fact that it was in the land of Egypt, right? In Hebrew, the word for Egypt is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim in Hebrew is the word Meitzarim, which means boundaries, borders, constrictions, that which is holding us back, right? You can hear the idea. Whenever the Torah, by the way, tells us any of these stories, just FYI, tangent. Any of the time Torah tells us any of these stories, any story in the Torah is not to teach you Jewish history. Any Jewish history you get out of the Torah, it's all true, but the fact that you just picked up that information is a bonus. That's not the main thing it's about. Torah is from the word hora'ah, from the word mora. Mora is teacher. Torah is teachings for what? Teachings for life. So Torah is the original spiritual self-help book, right? Of course, I guess that makes God the life coach, spiritual life coach. And so Mitzrayim, you hear the idea that we all have our boundaries, borders, constrictions, that which is holding us back, right? We all have those things, whether they be physical constraints, whether they be the emotional responses that have been put into us by our nature, by our nurture, whether it be the movies and the TV and all the culture and stuff that we sat through, getting all those ideas and those things and those feelings burned into the back of our subconscious. All of these things that have been put into us, the way we were spoken to, and then the way our mind went ahead and perpetuated those voices and those attitudes and those ways of being over and over and over again. All of these things, all of our Mitzrayims that have been put into us, right? And we see what happens with the Jewish people. They're in there, the Mitzrayim. Then what happens? They get taken out of there. That the makot, different plagues, we could talk about those too. But they get taken out of there. And where do they go when they leave Egypt? Where do they go? They go to the desert. Right? What's in the desert? Answer. There you go. Not much. That's exactly the idea, right? The idea is to bust out of your personal Egypt. And when you bust out of your personal Egypt, when you bust out of that prison, that mentality, that way of thinking, those emotions, you find your way through that. You're able to deal with whatever the trauma is. And to get more practical is not for right now. Then you get to your personal place of desert, your personal place of openness, right? True openness, true open-mindedness, right? Not the open-mindedness of your university campus where if you say something against what they have to say, they will destroy you. That's not the open-mindedness we're referring to here, right? True the capacity to actually consider alternatives, true capacity to make a choice beyond what I've been programmed to do up till now, whether it be by society, whether it be by parents, whether it be by wherever else we could have picked it up, whether it be by the magazines that told me I'm supposed to be this way or that way, right? whether it be the advertisements that, put something attractive next to something else, and in order that in my mind I should associate that with that. All these different ways, right? To be able to extract myself enough that I can even consciously pick up on what's going on and why I feel what I feel and why this song makes me think about that memory, how that happens. To be able to extract ourselves enough and to go to that personal place of desert, and it's from there that the Jewish people get the Torah. Because it's only to the extent that we open ourselves up, free ourselves from that which has been holding us back, from our constrictions, from the mentalities, from the mindsets, from the philosophies, only to the extent that we open ourselves up and free ourselves, that we can go ahead and truly receive a new piece of information the way it was meant to be received. Right? Because if you don't do that, then even if you got a new piece of information, you're still filtering it off of your old Mitzrayim's filter, your old Mitzrayim system, the motherboard. And so it's just going to filter out anything that doesn't work, So you'll start slicing and dicing the Torah up and editing it to fit into your preconceived notions, right? And so then you'll just start calling, you take one or two things from the Torah, you call it Tikkun Olam, and then you reject the other 98%. And, you'll go to your quote unquote Jewish institution and, take a couple of quotes from the Talmud, twist it up, stick it on its head, stick a fork in it, and you'll call it Judaism. And you'll basically just be working for the philosophies that are antithetical for Judaism and just calling it Judaism, right? So it's very doable, but that just shows you how far it can go to if we don't truly do a Mitzrayim on the falsehoods that have been presented to us, whether that be religiously and philosophically, whether that be also just in our own lives, emotionally, the way we look at ourselves, our self-perceptions, and anything else. And so this is where the journey has to begin. Right now, it makes sense. This is where the journey has to begin. You can't, there's no skipping this, because you could pile a lot of stuff on top. You could learn a lot of Judaism, Torah, whatever. And you could, and it's worth something. But to really make change, we have to go through this process of reevaluation, of freeing ourselves from the past, so that our past isn't just basically going to determine our future plus a couple of mitzvot. You know what I mean? And so this is really what Passover, what we're trying to gain and take from Passover, right? Is this concept of freedom and inner freedom. And to break away isn't so pashut sometimes, not so simple at all. That's why perhaps we find that when the Jewish people leave Egypt, they leave how many times, right? A lot of times I ask this question to groups. How many times do Jewish people leave Egypt? How many times? Once. What do you mean? No, you look in the Torah, you see they kind of leave twice, right? The Jewish people are taken out. You have the 10 plagues, and then the Jewish people leave, right? But then 7 days later, they get chased down again by the Egyptians. And that's when the whole splitting of the sea thing happens, right? That whole big fireworks event. And so again, we said that everything that's going on in the Torah, all these stories, the Jewish history, it's all a message for us in our own lives. It's telling us, it's revealing something to us real about our own lives. So what is it telling us exactly? So one of the great Hasidic masters explains that the reason why the Jewish people get out of Egypt twice is because for any good, strong exile, you need to have two redemptions. Why? Because any good, strong exile has two levels of exile. And what he refers to as exile of body and exile of mind. What do we mean by this? Let me give you an example. Imagine you have a guy, happily married, And he's really focused in that what's his goal in this marriage is he wants to have a strong relationship with his wife, strong relationship with kids. And so that's really his primary, that's his focus, that's his home base, that's his priority number one. But then one day, so there he is having, he's having his nice, good relationship, totally focused in on his family. But then what happens? One day he checks his bank account, like, uh-oh, it's getting pretty close to zero. I might actually have to leave this house in order to get a job, in order to make money, in order to bring it back to the house and support our life. So this is stage one exile, my friends. Recognize what he's doing. Nothing wrong with stage one exile. Stage one exile is something that we often have to do, and that's okay. Stage one exile is exile of body. Physically, he leaves the house to achieve something that needs to be achieved in order to bring it back to his home base. So it's an exile of body. Physically, he left home base, his house, but he knows that this is home base. I got to go outside in order to accomplish something, in order to bring it back to home base. Stage one exile. But what happens? Fast forward 3 years down the road. Now we catch up with this guy once again. He walks in. He walks after a long day of work. He walks into his house. He looks around. Nobody's there. He realizes, they're all in the back. They're all in the back doing whatever they're doing. He says, oh, good. Now I can get done here a little bit of what I want to get done. So he busts out his briefcase. He busts out the laptop. He starts, typing away or whatever, and gets involved in some of his work. And in run the kids, and they start jumping on his head and sitting in his lap and everything. And this guy, he's like, oh man, why don't these kids just leave me alone here so I can get done here what I want to get done? See what just happened? Very subtle over time, but somewhere along the line, so easy to make that slip, that this guy got so used to going and in exile of his house and living in exile of his home base, that he made this slip, and he ends up becomes home, and he starts calling home exile and exile home. Did you hear that idea? That's stage two exile of mind. When you lose sight of what's home base in the first place, right? And this happens in so many areas of our life, right? This happens in all sorts of different things that are pulling us away from our purpose, from our point, from who we want to be, from what we want to be, from how we want to be. In life, in our personal lives, in relationships. I'll give you, any addiction, take alcohol, for example, right? Alcohol, right? A person can quit alcohol, but there's two ways to quit alcohol. There's at first, it's like, okay, I got to give this up. So a person gives it up, but then they have a struggle. Then they have a struggle with it, It's hard. They've physically removed the alcohol from them. Instead of taking it and physically consuming it, they've taken and said, I don't want this anymore. And they're going to stay away from there are certain places that maybe they would have had it, right? If a person's a smoker and they want to quit smoking, one of the first steps to do that is to wherever you keep that pack of cigarettes, move it into another place. If they keep it in the front pocket, so you move it in another pocket. This way, at least you become conscious when you reach for it and you realize it's not there. Then already at least that's stage one of like breaking that automatic connection. So anyway, the first thing that happens with the alcoholic, right? A person, stage one of redemption from the alcohol is redemption of body, right? I'm physically not going to drink that alcohol, but still mentally, man, I want that alcohol. You know what I mean? I want that alcohol. So what's redemption? What's stage two of redemption? Redemption of mind. The point where you internalize so much that for me, this is poison. I don't even want it. That's a whole other level, my friends, of redemption. right? Same thing happens in our relationships as well, right? Imagine you have a guy and a gal, and they're going out, and at first things are good, but what happens, over time, this argument and another argument, then sooner or later, you're always arguing. And then you're like, I think it's time we call this quits. So the two of you break up, but then like 7 days later, one of you calls the other. Usually it's the guy calls the girl. Oh, I just wanted to see how you're doing, which by the way is code for I want to see that you're doing poorly so that I can feel better about myself, right? Okay. Don't think I'm giving away much on that one. So, sure enough, of course, you guys start getting back to talking, and it's kind of nice. And start saying, hold on, and say, why? This is nice. Why do we break up anyway? We can make this work, and who cares what your mother says anyway? We should do this. Let's get back together. Okay, let's try. Okay, so then they make up. They make up to meet, to have some coffee, whatever. And then the two of them sit down. And when the time comes, the two of them meet, and they sit down and they meet. They start talking, and then 10 minutes into it, each one's thinking, now I remember why I broke up with this person. And then they break up for good, right? Because any real exile, any real relationship, or shall I call it an entanglement, you got to break up twice, right? There's the first breakup where you realize that in the physical, which we'll call exile of body, or redemption of body rather. Then there's still that something still there and all that. Then you should bring it. Then the second time already, like, all right, now, right, this isn't right. Okay. So really, all of our Mitzrayims and all of our exiles have these two stages, right? The thing, that's the issue, and the mentality that comes along with the thing, that's the issue, right? And to be able to break out of it, on both of those levels, right? Which is not so simple, but let's understand at least the landscape here, right? That this is what we're trying to do in our life. If we want to grow, if we want to become free, if we want to be people who are living in accordance with our purpose and with our goal and with truth and what's reality, and not living from a place of familiarity or fear of going on the journey and doing what I know is right. So this is the idea and the message of Pesach that I think we can all take, and the energy, more importantly, the energy of Pesach that we can be looking to internalize into our lives. My friends, questions, thoughts, ideas before we say Laila Tov or good afternoon. I guess that's all she wrote. Let me see, we got 3 chats here. Nothing doing. All right, my friends, I hope this is meaningful. I hope this is helpful. Oh, wait, hold on a second. Where is the essence of the desert? The essence of the desert is that concept of, consciousness and open-mindedness, to truly be able to think outside of the box that you previously had yourself in, to be able to extract yourself from that box. Because that's what freedom is. First and foremost, freedom is the ability to free oneself from the trappings of whatever I'm being pulled towards, right? It could be that even the thing that you're being pulled towards isn't a bad thing, but then so then come at it from a conscious place, right? Matter of fact, we see this in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers. Ezu Gibor, who's the strong person? Hakovesh et Yisrael, the one who conquers their inclination. It doesn't say Hakovesh et Yetzar Harash Shalo, the one who conquers their evil inclination. It doesn't even say that. It says the one who conquers their inclination. Maybe it's a good inclination. The point is, though, don't just do something because that's your inclination. Come to it from, it's good that you're in general motivated in the right way and you have a good path and whatever, but still come to it from a conscious place. Don't come to it from a conditioned place. If you have good conditioning, so good, enjoy that, be happy about that, be happy that things are flowing in the proper way, but then still come to it from a conscious place. Okay, my friends, hope this is meaningful and helpful. God bless you. Have a great, great, great month ahead of freedom and miracles.